when I went through a terrible, terrible divorce. I don't think any of them are good, but it just really triggered a lot of childhood trauma wounds that I didn't really even know were there. And I felt like I couldn't come up for air. I felt like I was drowning in despair and sadness. And I didn't know what to do. And so I just did what I had been doing for 15 years. And I started going to the canvas and going to my journal in a new way.
Went all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, won blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. CASCM is a B2B content production company helping organizations create and share their stories. We aim to create space where businesses can build assets and drive revenue through writing and talking. Content creation should be enjoyable and accessible. At CASCM, we love helping make that happen. Learn more at cascm.com. Your team had reached out a while ago, and I think something happened, so we couldn't record. I think maybe I got sick or something along those lines.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah. And it was weird because when it came through, there was a request, I immediately forwarded it to my mom, who's an artist.
Yes, I've read about her.
Yeah. And it's just been in my life forever. My grandmother, her mom, was also an artist. And my dad, who was actually not an artist, is actually now a writer, right? So he was a dentist, an oral surgeon, had his own business, retired. It's like, well, what are you going to do now? And he's like, I don't know. And now what he says, he's like, whatever the fuck I want to do, right? And as he becomes a writer, publishes a book, published a second book, working on his audiobook right now. And so it's like creativity's been in my life. Like I grew up with an art studio in my house. It was my mom's art studio, it was my grandmother's art studio. And so like I remember going in there with my friends
I love
and like
this.
when we were really little to just draw, do whatever, make marks. Like you talk about on your podcast, like making marks. My mom talks a lot about like there's no mistakes in art because it's like a thing you go in and you think, I just did it wrong. I got to start over. Then you start getting frustrated with yourself.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when your team had reached out to talk, I was just like, wow, it's nice. That's my mom. And she was super excited. And so it's fun, right? Like just entering that creative space. So I thank you for reaching out and to be able to have this conversation with you.
You bet. You know what it's like?
Yeah.
It's what's so fun is you can talk to the highest level entrepreneurs, finance bros, doctors, doesn't matter what it might be, but all of a sudden we start to talk about art and everybody just kind of lights up a little bit.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
It's so fun.
Yeah. I had just written a piece, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Have you read that book?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it's at my bedside.
Yeah, yeah. And it's one of those books that you can just pick up or listen to or hear him talk. It's almost like meditative in an interesting way. And, even when my dad was writing a book, so this is like my stream of consciousness, I'll just go. And because like that's the creative space where you just talk. And I think that allows you to possibly create art is to say, you know what? There are no rules. Just create something. And being in business and in entrepreneurship, and we have an insurance brokerage business on the side. That's what I'd done for so long. And that still exists today. I would see people go through stress and go through frustrations or running a business. And you're constantly, what have you done for me lately? And what are you going to do next month? And then to take it back. And let's say this entrepreneur business owner, let's say they create a podcast about an interest they have of running marathons. I don't know, right? Or being an artist or on the side. That is the thing that they enjoy the most that allows them to go back to their business to then have more fulfillment, whatever. And just like you said, like work that stress through your body. And so that's why I'm fascinated by it. And to your point of like, you just see people light up, which obviously you've seen.
Yeah, all the time. It's great. I'm so glad that this is the direction my life has called me to, because it certainly wasn't early on. I was not that kid that wanted to be an artist. It just kind of found me.
Do you remember being in school and going to art class and having a love for it, or what did you have for it?
I wouldn't say I had a love for it, but I was just endlessly curious. And I was the kid that was kind of always like building mud pies and just I always kind of loved to be creative, like I think all kids are. But then I had this experience in third grade where the art teacher, we were all lined up at tables, and the art teacher put a lump of clay in front of each of us. And the assignment was to mold the clay into mushrooms. And she was going to show us how a week later, we were going to fire them, and she was going to bring them back, and we're going to see how pretty the colors were and all of that. So she put the lumps of clay in front of all of us. She said to mold a mushroom and paint it. So I did that, but I had some clay left over. So I rolled, like, made little balls, and I put them on top of the mushroom itself, and then painted those a different color. And so the next week, as they are now fired and beautiful, and she would go down the table, and she was putting the mushrooms in front of each of the children and kind of giving each of them a little nice, I love that blue, David, I love that, whatever, giving it. And she got to me, and she put the mushroom in front of me, and she said, "Jodie, those little balls were not part of the assignment." And in that moment, I just thought, well, I'm not the artist here. All the other kids are the artists. And now I know I'm the fucking artist, people.
Yes. Yeah.
I was that.
Yeah.
But that experience is really, really common amongst so many people. It just takes the slightest little negative something, any kind of connotation that makes us self select out of that.
Yeah.
And I did.
That
I
sucks.
self-selected out. Yeah. And I didn't take art classes, didn't want to take art classes in high school. I mean, why would I want to be embarrassed again? Right. So that wasn't for me. Didn't Nothing in college, no interest whatsoever. But then I was in my mid-30s, and I had young kids. And I started feeling like I was drowning just a little bit, and just like giving to so many. We had our own business and everything. And I just thought, oh, I think I'll paint. And I started painting, and I started, that act alone started bringing me back to myself. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. You felt that. And then you talk about later on, like 15 years later, right? That I don't know if you talk about that, like what had happened or why, like you were painting. So it's not like you
Right.
weren't, but then you went and heavily leaned into that.
Yeah. So it was at age 35 is when I picked up a paintbrush and started painting. And really, because I had been an entrepreneur and had not followed the traditional art route, I wasn't indoctrinated into, well, you better have a plan B, because it was never a
Yeah.
plan A. Right. And so
Right. Right.
then when I started painting, and I had lived in a small town, and some people came through my house. Some of them owned a store or two stores. And then they asked if they could start carrying my work. So it became like I just turned it into a business, because that's what I knew how to do, because I hadn't been indoctrinated. I was like, oh, I know how to market, I know how to sell, and now I know how to create the product. So that's what I was doing. So I wasn't thinking of it at all in terms of how it could really, really be serving me, except that I knew I was happier. I knew that. But it was, like you said, 15 years later, when I went through a terrible, terrible divorce. I don't think any of them are good, but it just really triggered a lot of childhood trauma wounds that I didn't really even know were there. And I felt like I couldn't come up for air. I felt like I was drowning in despair and sadness. And I didn't know what to do. And so I just did what I had been doing for 15 years. And I started going to the canvas and going to my journal in a new way. So it became not at all about the commodification of anything. And it wasn't even about, finally, it wasn't about making something pretty. It was about just being honest with where I was in that moment, and showing up, ruining a lot of brushes because I'm digging into the canvas, and just pouring all of this emotion out of me. And of course, now, years later, we have so much information about what that actually does, about how creativity really does move stress through our body. It's one of, as the Nagoski sisters said in the book Burnout, identified 7 different ways that we can move stress through our bodies, and creativity is one of them. And I really think that without art, well, I think art saved my life. I mean, I was that low.
Yeah. I think it sounds like too, though, you're saving other people through this by giving them, I don't know what it would be, the audacity, the freedom, the ability to go and create.
Yeah.
right? And I've witnessed it, like I've talked about before with my mom when she went through chemo treatment.
Right.
Like that's how she got through, besides my dad, her husband, that's how she got through that.
Yeah.
Because, and then she, set a show, and to watch that afterwards, like there's the paintings, there's the drawings, there's not a lot of words that you can put to that.
Yeah.
Right. And then she just did it again because then she just had back fusion, spine fusion with a neurosurgeon, and she
Wow.
had to do the same thing all over where she couldn't walk.
Wow.
And so creating her art and expressing it through her marks, through her drawings, through her painting, that's what gets you through it. So to hear your story, to talk about what you went through, and then teaching others to do the same. And then even like I listened to an episode you talked about the science of it. Like that sounds great. Like people are like, that's ridiculous. I mean, again, like I said before, like I could see it through a business owner getting on a podcast and talking about having this amazing connection with another individual or multiple people and just talking. That's like, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? Because you're not making any money right now. Then to come off of it and like, don't tell anyone in my office this, but this is my favorite part of my day.
Yeah.
This gives me the energy that I need to show up for other people. And so it's like, this is real. And then the science is there, and like you talk about. And
yeah,
to have all of that, yeah, it matters.
It really matters. And one of the things that I talk about, I coined this phrase years ago, honest art, because somebody said, how do you, because I do so much abstract work. And with abstract work, somebody said, how do you know when it's done? Because it's at any point it can be done. How do you know when it's done? And I said, well, two things. Number one, when I hang it on my own wall for like 20 years, not for the next week, but for a real, real long time, if not forever. But the second thing is, was it honest? And so that opened up this discussion about what does it mean to be an honest artist? And this is what I love about Rick Rubin, the way he talks about it. Like, did you do it for you? Did you not look at another artist's work and think, oh, I want to make art like them? That's not really honest. You can be inspired. I'm inspired by artists all the time. But when I show up, is it something that's coming through me? And it's just my voice within the art, because that's when the real magic happens. Not only does it happen on the canvas, but that's the transformation that happens within us. That's what your mother felt. That's what I felt. It's because it wasn't about commodification, wasn't about marketing, it was just for us.
Yeah. Well, so much of art, like you could look at a podcast, for example, a website, a drawing, a graphic, that it's for the algorithm, Instagram. It's so hard to stay away from that. What is going to get engagement? Who's going to like it? What are they going to think about me that I'm creating this art? And this is out there, and like someone, your friends are out there talking about, like, wow, this really sucks, right?
Yeah,
You don't know what's going through your head. But so much is created for the algorithm.
exactly.
Which is great from a business standpoint, but it gets totally in the way of creativity.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating.
Yes, it's really frustrating.
And like music, behind your shoulder, you have Prince,
okay.
right? Right. And what Prince created, if you go back and listen to the music he was creating, it just defied the norm of what everyone else was creating.
Exactly.
Like maybe today you listen to it and be like, well, it sounds, because everyone was inspired by it.
Right.
And it was so far, like you watch the movie Bohemian Rhapsody and talk about Queen. It's like, well, we need a 3 to 4 minute song and it has to have a format. And it's like, no, like we need something totally different. And that is super inspiring because it just gets in the way of the creativity when you're creating it for someone else or for the algorithm.
Yeah. And it's really tempting, really, really tempting, especially I work with a lot of artists who really want to turn this into a business. And I love that part of what I do. But it's really tempting to look at somebody else who has success and go, oh, I need to do it like that. It is so difficult to trust ourselves. So much of being an artist is trusting ourselves. It's so hard. And it's like a constant battle to just believe that whatever is going to come through me is going to be good enough. Because here's the deal, Eric, it has never existed on the planet. I mean, you think about that. An artist, whether it's a songwriter, playwright, a book, paintings, it's never existed ever on this planet. And it is birthing through us. And so the amount of self out. Like, it's almost like, are you kidding me? It's coming through me. And then you see it or you read it or you hear it. And you're like, holy shit, I did that.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. I felt like when I started the business in entrepreneurship,
Yes.
and I was like, that was something that never existed before.
Yeah.
The name of the company, the whatever, the vision, the this, the website, the anything that goes with it. And sometimes you have to go back and maybe as an artist to look at the piece that you created to say, I just created this to exactly what you just said. This didn't exist before you did the work.
Yeah.
But I get it. It's hard too because it's like, okay, now what? Because I know there's a lot, a lot of people come in, it's like, I want to have purpose with what I do. And all you still gotta pay, right? You gotta pay for the frames, you gotta do this, you gotta pay to show up to the gallery, you gotta hang it. I don't know. There's so much, you gotta paint the paintbrushes and whatever. It's hard on the same. I mean, you say it, right? I love it. Starving artist my ass. Like it's so good.
Well, that's again because I was not indoctrinated into this. And when you think about historically, Eric, it's like we know so much about the world. We experience so much of the world. We interpret so much of the world through the lens of an artist. When you think of hieroglyphics, that tells our story. That helps us understand our own humanity. And I would say the Sistine Chapel would just be another church without the Michelangelo's art. And there's so many different things that we can slide this concept into, but other than the priesthood, there's never been a profession that assumes poverty. So artists create so much value for our lives in so many different ways, but there is an assumption of poverty. And I just think that's such BS. And the thing is like the world is not going to change that for us. It's the artists who have to actually think, is that true? Does it have to be that way? And if they have come up through the art ranks, that they'll tend to have more of that belief. But lucky for me, I didn't. And I just kind of thought, well, I'll just apply these skills that I've used as an entrepreneur. And it worked.
Yeah. How is the industry today? Like in music, for example, right? Like you would create an album, you would sell the album, the CD, the tape, the record, whatever it would be. And then streaming came along. First it was like Napster, so they're giving the songs for free. And then it went to Spotify and all this, and they're making pennies on the dollar. Now it's like merch and live concerts is where it's at, right? All this kind of stuff. And constant battling in the courts as to like what's going to happen there. The middle person in all this content, like the middle person in so many places has been taken away because we don't need it. Like you could have a PR company, but you could find me, you could reach out to us. And there's countless of this, of long form content creation and social media and influencers that you can get out in front of to cut the middle person out. Books, the book publishing industry is changing drastically. Amazon came in there and be like, we're changing the game, right? And there's still the big players, but it's like anyone can go write a book now. And so art's interesting because there is the digital side of it, but there's also the physical side. Like going to the gallery, like my mom was in town recently and we went to the Mint Museum in Uptown Charlotte, right, to that one. And you can see pictures of it, right? It's just different to be in the gallery and then to watch someone like her walk through the gallery or to walk through it with her to help, like that's a different experience, right? That like going to the Sistine Chapel is a different, you can see it. Like we go watch YouTube videos, we could probably do VR, right? All that said, like, where does the industry look like to you from a standpoint of the business side of it, right? To the physical side of art? Like, where is that business today? Where do you think that's going?
So, first of all, I don't think we're ever going to not want to experience art in its physical form. I don't think it's ever going to be a place where we're going to completely digitize art. I think we're always going to want to experience art, whether it's a sculpture or a painting or whatever, intimately and personally. We want it to hang on our walls. And one of the great things is that I have found 100% of the time, if you look at a piece of art on a screen, whether a phone or computer or whatever it might be, and you see it, then later you see it in person, it's always 10 times better in person. So that gives me hope. I don't think that's going to go away. But in terms of just kind of the industry or, how artists are able to move forward, there's never been a time where we've had this much opportunity, much like musicians or singers. They have all of these different platforms now where they are able to put themselves on Spotify. They're able to do, these different things. it's very similar in that way for visual artists now. So in the past, the only way that artists had to really get their work seen by masses of people would be to get representation into a gallery. And the thing about that is, well, there's a lot more artists than there are galleries. And then galleries take 50%, 50% of everything. And in my experience and in the experience of many, many, many artists, so I hope if you have any listeners out there who are artists, I don't want them to be surprised by this, but there's a lot of real bad practices that happen in the gallery system. In other words, if you've got a gallery, if you live like me in Texas and you have your art in a gallery 3 states away, and they sell that piece of art where they, by contract, they have to pay you within a certain amount of time, usually within 30 days, they have to pay you. But if you don't know that that piece of art sold, then they can just indefinitely not pay you. And so this is a practice that I have experienced. So my point is that the gallery system has not always been in favor of the artist. There are some amazing galleries out there. So this is not across the board, some amazing galleries out there.
For sure.
But this has been a pretty common practice. Well, now we've been given the ball back a little bit more now that we do have social media. So prior to that, we had really no way to get our art out there. Now, if you can build up a presence on social media, I mean, even if you have 1,000 people that follow you and your art, because this is what a lot of artists say to me, I only have 1,000 followers. Like, are you kidding? What if 1,000 people are lining up outside your door and they can't wait to get in your studio or into your house or into your kitchen to see the art that you're doing right now? 1,000 people? Holy crap. Right. So now the game is changing and we have a lot more ability to get our work out there. We can work with, if we see a hotel that's going up, like for me in Austin, I can easily find out who the design company is that's working on this project, contact them myself and say, hey, my name's Jodie King. I'm a local artist. Let me show you some of my images. Love to talk to you about working together. Before that, it was impossible. So it's a complete game changer now for artists. And we really do I think we have the advantage.
Yeah. You're taking that middle person out because
Yes.
you'd have to go through the broker who's running the deal and doing all this type of stuff. Yeah, it's interesting because I saw that in the book world too, where the indie bookstores, which everyone's like, go to the indie bookstores. Well, yeah, there's some amazing ones out there, but there's other ones that will like never tell you that the book sold. And we're like, Amazon, I get it. Amazon's the big giant, whatever. It's automated. And
Yeah.
again, it's less money and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, I understand the concern that you have because it's like, well, the person's out there, they want to get paid for it. And you never even told, they might never contact you again. And they're doing it all by paper. There's all you got to lose is one piece of paper and the
Right.
game's over and they'll never tell you. So it's just in general in the creative community, it's very difficult. But I think what you're talking about is
Yes.
agency, like taking agency and going out there and reaching out, which is something that you can talk to your kids about. We talk to each other. You're talking to artists about it,
Yeah.
right? And you're saying, hey, if you take agency over this,
Yeah.
you saw this hotel going up, you saw this apartment complex, this new business, they're desperate for stuff to put on the walls.
Yes.
And you could show up. And even if you gave them a piece, then people walk in, their clients walk in and they're like, well, who created this? And you could have your name and here's how much it costs, right? They could buy it. Like
Exactly.
they could almost become their own gallery. There's no rules for it.
Exactly. And I'm working with an artist right now, and I have a mentoring program for artists. And I was saying, what is it you want? What is it you really want to do? She says, well, I've always wanted to have my art in the local children's hospital. And I'm like, okay, here's how you do it. And it's like, you follow the steps. I mean, Chat GPT can practically tell you how to do it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing.
What is your thought on AI right now as it relates to art? I know you're physical, who knows where we get to that point, but there's the digital side of art as well, like graphic design. Like you just brought it up. So what are your thoughts on AI?
Well, my thoughts on AI in terms of, creating art are different than my thoughts on AI and having an art business and an art career. So in terms of AI creating art, I think that we don't know where it's going to go, but I'm going to always side or err on the side of humanity. And I just think that original fine art is always going to be important and necessary. So it's kind of like the whole NFT movement. I thought that was so cool. I really did think it was cool because it was a way for artists to be able to continue to make money in perpetuity. But the thing about what we found is that people want original art hanging on their walls. And you just, right now there's not a way to replicate that, nor do I think people are wanting it. And that's the thing. When I said I'm going to err on the side of humanity and people, I think we are going to always want that. Maybe I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. But that's my thought on it. Now, when it comes to AI and artists and how we can harness the value of AI, I think it's amazing. So, one of the things I often talk to artists about is, they want to get their art out there. They want to build a following. They want to have a group of collectors. And I'm like, okay, listen, you've got a warm audience and you have a cool audience opportunity. The warm audience is going to be those people that join your email list, because those are the people that are much more invested in your art and in who you are in art as an artist. Okay, so that's your warm audience. I know everybody's talking about social media and building social media. That's important too. That's your cool audience. So we've got to get those people onto your email list so that we can nurture them, really let them know more about what you're about. That scares the shit out of artists. Like, email? You want me to do email? But now with ChatGPT, you can literally type in the craziest stuff. I was working with an artist in the beginning of September, and I was telling her, do you know about, she was saying she needed to write this email for her email list, but she's been so nervous. She doesn't know what to write. She doesn't know how to talk about herself. But she grew up in Mexico, actually on the Mexico-Texas border. So a lot of her art is influenced by her Mexican heritage and upbringing. And so within her art, there's a lot of cactus, a lot of agave, a lot of this sort of thing. So I said, you're not going to believe this. So I opened my computer, we went to ChatGPT, and I typed in, write me an email about my latest collection of cactus paintings from my Mexican heritage growing up on the border between Mexico and Texas, and make it have a sassy tone. Within 3 seconds, 3 seconds, this email came up, and it's the subject line, feeling a little prickly. And it just was a brilliant, and the relief that she felt. Now, of course, she had to go back in and tweak it and make it a little more personal, things like that. But that, from an artist's perspective, those sort of business things that are often holding us up, I think it's just been incredible. In addition to that, I was also working with some artists, and their goal was to get into more galleries in 2025, or into any galleries in 2025. And so we said, okay, let's go to ChatGPT. What are the requirements? So we want a gallery that is supporting emerging artists in this location that likes, and you put in your type of art, whether it's Western art, abstract art, whatever it might be. Please give me a list of, all of these galleries in this town and their contact information. 3 seconds, bam. That would have taken days, if not weeks, of research in the past.
Yeah. Or never, right?
Yeah.
Because you would get to that point where I can't do it.
Yeah.
There's just there's this wall up. It stops people from doing the thing, because you hear about artists they create something and maybe they don't want to share it. Like, again, what are people going to think? And then maybe get to that point where they do want to share it. And then taking those steps to do it gets in the way.
Yeah.
Where it's someone you can come in and show them because you created something, and it's almost please share it. There's so much negative and there's so much bad stuff, that there is someone out there, which is just always wild to me, that there's always someone out there that needed to see what you created, especially if it's art or something positive.
Exactly. If you're called to create it, somebody needs to hear, see, read, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
What you have to say. Yeah.
And in that moment, in that time, it catches that one person. That's the beauty of it. And then people are influenced. I've used that word a few times already, and inspired, and that drives them to create. I was thinking when we were going to talk today, I was thinking about my mom, obviously. 9/11 happens, or is happening, I should say. My mom's on a flight from Buffalo to New York City.
Wow.
And everyone's got a story, right? And on our family side, nothing happens specifically. Like moments happen and trauma, perhaps. My brother worked in a building right nearby. So I got woken up and I covered the West Coast. So I worked 11 to 8. So I was like sleeping in. My mother-in-law called and something happened in New York City. Is your brother okay? So I got woken up, called him up, talked to him on the phone. He's like, I don't know what just happened. And moments later, the phones went dead. We didn't get to talk to him until that evening, right?
Wow.
So my mom's on a flight to New York City on a JetBlue flight. They're watching it on television. My dad, I talked to, calls me up. I've never heard his voice the way I heard his voice in them. We didn't know because you couldn't talk, right? There were some cell phones, but not, she goes back, they reroute him back to Buffalo. And she created an entire 9/11 series off of this moment because of probably what she was feeling.
Exactly.
And she could tell all of these stories that I've shared more than anyone. And honestly, she couldn't tell it better. Her art could tell the story better.
Exactly.
And that's what it is. So like she was influenced by this. I mean, differently, but like would visit Italy and she was inspired by Italy, Charleston, South Carolina, where we spend a lot of time. There's series based off of that. So these are her influences. And then it goes back to when she was in college and studying and all this kind of stuff. So these influences happen, but everyone's influenced by something. You had referenced being influenced or not. Like the news is so bad. And maybe there was another school shooting or whatever is bothering you, like to use that art as not only the influence, but as the whatever that might be. But I mean, you're nodding along and see what I'm saying. And I talk about it and it brings me back to those moments and I can picture her pieces, right? It's heavy.
It is heavy. But when I think about the value that she gave to herself and the value that artists give to themselves through the creative process, through being able to process these very heavy, big, deep emotions, that's one thing that is paramount. It's incredible. But when you couple that with, then she creates this collection and then has the courage to put it out to the world to see, right? So now she's even strengthening herself more. But then what happens is that she is validating the human experience of other people within that context. So whether it's 9/11 or her journey through chemo or whatever it might be, that's the thing. That's what we do as artists is when we turn ourselves inside out enough to process our experience through art. When the viewer sees, hears, or reads, whatever it might be, it makes us feel less alone. And there is a loneliness pandemic right now. I mean, epidemic, really. We are
Yep.
so feeling
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so disconnected from each other. And then you get this art, however it's created, it really does help us connect to ourselves again. And it's like, yeah, I feel that too. So if she felt it, then we're connected now. It's like I'm thinking of the Jelly Roll song right now, I Am Not Okay. I'm barely getting by. And I just think the number of people that are going to hear that piece of art and resonate with it and feel like I can get through another day, like that's what art does. That's what artists do is we validate the human experience. And it's a gift to be able to do so. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be again for commodification. It can really just be for yourself through your own journaling or through your own whatever in your own studio. It still has that ability to do that. You don't have to be in a gallery. You don't have to be selling it or anything. It still has the same value, regardless if there's a monetary, number on it.
Yeah. I love the way you said that. And I think artists, creatives at any level, right? And I think that's what you're talking about. It doesn't have to be like some professional who's made it, Michelangelo, right? The whole thing.
Exactly.
You see the world differently, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just even more aware. And it's not better, right? It's like everyone's on this time thing that we're on and they're going at a different speed and it's like whatever. And you're dealing with whatever you're doing within the moment and the next moment will be something different. But like, and I'll see it with my mom and we can drive down the street together and she'll see things or discuss it, if it comes up. You're like, wow, you really see, like when you're driving down the road, you're like seeing stuff. Like some people can drive down the road and just see traffic, right? And burden and stress or whatever. Like, again, and creativity is not like, it doesn't have to be an artist. It could be any type of creativity.
Yeah.
I think when you explore that, and I'm sure you agree because you're not in long again, but like it just opens your senses, I suppose.
It does. It's like
Yeah.
when you're just the average Joe, you can you can sit and look at grass, right? And it kind of just looks like carpet almost, it's just grass. But when you are tuning your senses as an artist, I can only imagine. If I've always wanted to be a musician, I have no skills, can't sing, none of it. But you know that they are going to hear things differently than the way I hear things, right? But as a visual artist, when I look at grass, I notice how this blade kind of leans to the left and it twists just a little bit. And then on the edges of that blade, there's just a little bit of a lighter color. And then as it dips in, it gets a little darker. It's just a noticing, because if I love that, how would I capture that? I have to notice it first. So it is an attunement of the senses. And it's not always good, by the way, because then we become like little, those little sensitive beings.
It's a sensory overload, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can be. It can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. And then to be able to get that out, like you were bringing up the musician, it made me think before I just read Tom Petty's book, and people talked about how he connected with people is because it's through his music, and they needed it at certain points in their life. They needed to hear that song
Yeah.
that he wrote this story and somehow, and that's been going on forever, right? That just made me think of it. And he actually worked with Rick Rubin, right? So I guess like connecting all these different dots, but to have that ability to share that. And I think a lot of people have that ability to share it, like I said before.
Absolutely. I don't want anyone to think that this is reserved for a few of us. I would love it if everybody remembered it's in all of us in our own way. They did a study where they asked kindergartners, everyone here went to the classroom, said, everybody who's here who's an artist, raise your hand. And 100% of the kids raised their hand. And then they went into third grade classrooms and they said, everyone here who's an artist, raise their hand. And only half the kids raised their hand. So I would have been one that did not raise their hand, right? Depending on if that happened before that moment or after that moment. And then they went into seventh grade classrooms and only one child raised their hand. So either through whatever selection process, society, our own, whatever, we self-select out of I'm an artist, or let's just broaden it. I'm creative or I'm not creative. And the truth is, we all have that creativity. So this is not reserved for a select few of us. It's everyone. Maybe you prefer to bake or garden, or maybe it's not painting or music, whatever it might be. But there is always an element of creativity within us that can be expressed, so long as we just remember. We just a remembering.
Yeah. I would imagine it's inspiring for you to see someone who didn't think they were that, right? Because I've seen artists work at schools or work with elderly, right? I know my mom's done that before, and that's the inspiring. And then they're inspired, and the relationship that's formed because of that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that must be, yeah.
It's just the best. It's the absolute best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do people work with, I mean, obviously you podcasts that are out there, like you show up on these podcasts, like, and obviously it seems like it's a lot of fun for you to appear and have these deeper conversations. Like, how do people work with you?
So again, I have the Honest Art podcast. That's my podcast for people to get that content. But I also have a couple of online courses that teach people to create their own honest art. So I have that available, which I've had for years. Because here's the truth, Eric, it's like, it's all fun and games to say, I just want to express myself. But you do that like a dozen times and it looks like shit. You're like, I don't want to do that anymore. So this is like, I created this because I saw that happening. And so you can take what you're making and it gives you the skills to be able to turn into something you're proud of. So I have that. And then I have two mentoring programs, one called the Rebel Artist Society. The first one is called the Color Course for Rebels, by the way. I'm into rebels. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. Tell me not to do something and I'll do it twice. So it's like,
There you go. Yeah.
who I am. So so there's Color Course for Rebels, then there's Rebel Art Society, and then my highest touch program where I do the most intimate mentoring is called Studio Elite. But you can find me through jodieking.com, JODIEKING.com, or just DM me. I'm happy to answer any DM. It's me answering them. It's not an AI.
Yeah. And what you've created is so cool because I think it speaks to like, you don't have to go, oh, go become an artist. Like you can go create something different. Like you come across people who are in their pick an age. The number doesn't matter. I've learned that, right? Like whether you're 20, 30, 70, 100, like you can create and you can start doing something and you don't have to, well, I didn't study that in school or I didn't learn that. Like nowadays you can learn whatever you want. Like when you were 35 and you picked up the paintbrush, did you have influences at that time? Did you take classes? Like what was that?
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm old. I've been doing this now 21 years. You can do the math on that.
Yeah, that's right.
There was no YouTube. There's hardly any internet. It
Yeah.
was like that. So the whole dial up thing, that's the only thing that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did have this desire to paint. And my influence was, it was like New Year's Day. And I was with a bunch of people. We had gone somewhere and we were having that New Year's Day discussion. What are you going to do this year? Or what do you want to do this year? And one of the guys that was there was an artist. And I said, David, I want to paint this year. And he looks at me like, just paint. And I go, no, I don't know how to paint. And he goes, just paint. And I thought, huh, I didn't even realize I could just do that. And I said, okay, what do I do? And he said, get some brushes, get some paint, and paint on
Yeah.
something. And that's how it started. And then the training that I eventually got was just through reading a lot of books, again, because we didn't really have the internet. Now, here's the thing. And I was talking to an artist yesterday, and I was shocked that it's still such a thing. But my biggest hangup was that I thought I couldn't participate in this art business or art world because I didn't go to art school. Yesterday, I had a woman who's taken my classes, who's taken the color course. She's an amazing artist, amazing. And I'm like, what's really holding you back? She says, oh, I never went to art school. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that this is still happening, right? So I was self-taught when it became clear that people were wanting to buy my work and have it in stores and things like that. It scared me to death because I didn't want to be embarrassed by my work. So that really had me delve into how to make great art. And it's just been a journey ever since.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Because you can do it in whatever. I mean, I look at like a microphone, or like I'm not talking into a microphone with a podcast. Like, and I had a friend of mine who had kind of started doing it. He's like, no, you should definitely have it. And here's why. And blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right, we'll mess around with it. And this sounds terrible. And then you just like, I don't really care. Like,
Yeah.
not, you care about that, but you don't care. Like, if someone else doesn't like it, it's not for them. Cause then like someone reaches out and you want to be on the show. You're like, what's that all about? Like, we're not having this conversation. So, but it's for anybody to think like, you don't have to stay in that position. Like, who
Oh,
did I talk to? I think it was yesterday, and they work at this AI company, and I don't know what the numbers are, and they had the study on it. Like, regardless if it's true or not, and regardless if the percentages are out or off, it's like 70% of people aren't happy with their job.
mm,
But you can go and you can do something different, and you still acquired all those skills and resources and whatever and connections
yeah.
that you can then apply to something different. Like this day and age, it's like that one career is, I think that's like the thing of the past. And I think a lot of people are realizing it, even people that were told who might be like an older generation to say, no, that's all changed.
Yeah.
Right. Like, especially for kids today, I think about my youngest who she's very creative and very into the arts. And it's almost like, Dad, I want to go to Michael's today because I want to buy some clay and let's go. Like, enabling that and not directing it as far as like just helping that creative process go along. And I think the more I can do that just alone with my daughter and let her explore, and then she creates these things, like it's so much fun. And I think that'll serve her so well in the future to show that like you can create whatever you want, like what's coming to mind for you.
I love that. And you know what? If anybody ends up saying anything negative, like what happened with me and so many other people, she's got you and her grandmother's, you guys will have her back and she will continue
Yeah.
to remember. She'll just remember always that that's part of who she is.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And you have so many people's back, and to show up, to spend the time to share what you're sharing and talking to me, and which will absolutely influences me. I'll be talking to my mom about this conversation. She'll listen to it. But anyone that listens and what you're creating everywhere, like we need more of it. Like I look around, it's like, been in business for a long time and you have these conversations and it's important. And I get it. Like we have to make money to do the things that we want to do, right? It's a resource, it's a token, it's a whatever. But there needs to be more creativity.
Absolutely.
It can't just be about leadership and this and that, and business and numbers. And yes, of course, it's important, but the creativity is what sparks it all.
Absolutely.
So we just need more of it.
And to just piggyback on that,
Please.
I was watching an interview by Mark Cuban. So whatever you feel about Mark Cuban, but he's been very, very successful. And somebody said to him, the question was, who are you hiring out of school right now? What are you looking for? And he said, there was a time where my answer was so quick, it would be an engineer. And now it's a creative, because there's so many technologies coming out that's going to be doing the job of an engineer, but we're going to need more people who are creatives. And I just thought, yes.
That's it. It's huge.
Huge.
And people listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those soft skills, those creative skills, the willingness to vulnerability of whatever sharing, like seeing, like we talked about. Yeah.
Pretty big.
Well, Jodie, yeah, this has been a pleasure and honor to talk with you. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Eric. It really has been a pleasure. I love this. Like, I've been doing this so long, and I love having these conversations with you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, because it just reminds me of it's still my biggest, it's the hill I'll die on. It's still my biggest passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
This is a Quiet Loud Studios production, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.